Ray, I often think of you as being one of the busiest guys in the broadcast industry because you are. You're a busy dude. I mean, you've got EA Sports, you've got games, you've got radio, you've got the podcast, you've got lots of stuff. However, Dave Poulin, our guest on the Ray and Dregs podcast, will rival your busiest day. Morning radio, Leafs lunch for a couple of hours with the lovely Andy Petrillo, 6 calls from our good pal Steve Dryden. Recording Ray and Dregs now, pre-game hits for SportsCenter, the hot zone or whatever the hell we call it, post-game, and then more hits for SportsCenter after the Leafs and the Habs. Pooley, I mean, what is going on? You pounding the coffees today? This is a big shift for you.
We forgot Jay. I've got Jay tonight.
Oh, you've got Jay on, right? Of course you do.
How could you forget that? The most important guy.
Huge oversight.
Well, you know, when I was young, first of all, when I was younger, I used to watch Ray Ferraro play hockey. And then when I watched his broadcast career, I needed a guy to emulate. I needed a guy to watch in the business who had seemed to master it in every respect. And so I have tried to pattern my broadcast career after Ray Ferraro. And so you got to set the bar high, right? You got to try and be the best. Yeah. And we were almost exactly the same hockey player, exactly different. Like Ray 100%. And I discussed this. Well, remember we had dinner in Ottawa. We're really the first time we got a chance to sit down together, Ray. And in Ottawa at dinner, and people assume we know each other well over the years, but all I did was chase you around the rink. I never got to know you. And so we decided that we were basically had arrived at the same point in exactly the opposite manners, like totally different roads to get there. I mean, I was a college player, you were a junior player. You were a huge scorer. I was always on the defensive side of things. I played for really good teams. You maybe didn't play for really
No, I didn't play for really good teams.
But all those things considered, we see the game in a pretty similar manner, which is a little eerie.
What's crazy about that, Pooley, is like, you know, Dregs mentioned Steve Dryden, who's kind of like the backbone or conscience of everything we do on the air at TSN. But he would send out a note that I need a couple of points from this period. And I would talk about a goal. And I'd say, oh, look at the way they entered the zone, the way they changed lanes, the way that the puck went to the net and the traffic arrived and it's in the net. And Dave would send a note unbeknownst to me at the same time saying, watch the coverage get screwed up. The back checker loses his way. All of a sudden there's somebody open. It's crazy. It's 180 degrees from the way I see the game. And we get to the same point, right? Same point. It's just a different way of getting there.
Yeah.
It's really funny. But, you know, the whole broadcast thing is still new to me. I'm 6 years into it and still learning and now doing more games than I've ever done. And I watch other guys and I watch the way they do things. And I watch the way, you know, I'll watch the way they're looking at something. And there's other guys in the business that I'd say, okay, well, I'm looking at that totally differently. Like, couldn't be any more different. And I'm watching the same game. Not so with you.
But don't you think, Pooley, though, that way that you watch the game, like a lot of people that watch us on TV, they don't really maybe know us as players, but that was one of your great strengths as a player, was you knew where to be from, I'll call it a defensive posture, but it was the right place to be. And it just seemed like you knew how to do that, whether you were in Philadelphia or Boston. It didn't particularly matter. I kept running into you seriously you were in the right spot. That was a strength of yours.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think that came from never being one of the best offensive players. Like, I was a really good skater. I didn't play organized hockey till I was 9. I was a figure skater. And so right from day one, I was one of the best skaters. But the whole scoring thing, you know, it wasn't even through college. I was a really good college player, but I never looked at myself as a scorer. And it wasn't until I got to Sweden, the one year I played between college and the NHL, and Teddy Sater was my coach. And I remember him saying, okay, we have 2 imports. You got to lead the league in goals. I I looked at him. I said, I've never let a lead in goals in my life. Like, and the first game we played was against a big Swedish powerhouse, HV 71, HV Huet. Big team coming in, an exhibition game. And I scored 3 goals at hat trick. And we beat HV Huet 5-2 rather. It was a huge upset, exhibition. And our town was all fired up and excited. And Teddy came in after the game and said, okay, you just have to do that every game. Okay. And I ended up leading that league in goals. And from a confidence standpoint, it was like, oh, wait a second, maybe I can do this. It was just a different mindset, a different thought process.
When you went over there, did you have any idea how different the game was going to be?
No, in fact, I think I led the team in penalties that year because you still weren't allowed to hit on the forecheck, right? You couldn't hit in the offensive zone. And so that's what I did was forecheck. And no, I had no idea how different the game would be. And he built a 5-some. And our team had just relegated from Division 2 to Division 1. And normally when that happens, you drop right back down. And we had a great year. We finished 3rd in Division 1. And we almost qualified for Allsvenska. And we had a 5-some. And it was great. My left winger was a cop. He was an undercover cop. And my right winger was a crook. And my left defenseman was an all-time Swedish bad boy who had been suspended for a year for throwing the referee off the rink. And then the other guy was a guy named Ted Husing, who played a little bit in the American League as a Michigan State defenseman. So that was our 5-some. So I was the peace broker between the cop and the crook. And I say that these 2 guys grew up in the same town. They were the same age. And from like the time they were 12 years old, one was going to be a cop and one was going to be a crook.
That is outstanding. That's so good.
It was terrific.
Is that where you started to be a leader? I mean, like you're a great captain, Pooley.
Yeah, you know what? I was a captain when I was young, and I played house league till I was 12 or 13. Then I went back and I played house league when I was 16. And so I was the best player in house league at 16. That may shock you. And I was the best player in juvenile. That may shock you.
Juvenile.
Most guys don't get to play juvenile. And so, I wore the C a lot, and I wore it at Notre Dame. And I took a great deal of pride in it. I don't quite know where that happened. Somewhere along the way, I decided that it was maybe better to take charge of things and pretend you knew what you were doing than listen to someone else.
But okay, Pooley, like we talk about leadership and we talk about it a lot in the media, and it's really hard to define. When you were a captain and you were of some very, very good teams, what is leadership to you?
I think it's setting the right tone in that locker room and on the ice. And you talk about being in the right place. So that was part of the responsibility I took. Like if I was going to be the captain, I was going to be willing to challenge guys. I was the captain my 2nd year in the NHL. It was crazy. And I'm really careful to how I word this. I replaced Bobby Clarke as captain. I didn't follow. I mean, I followed Bobby Clarke as captain. I didn't replace him. Like I followed him. Everybody said, oh, you have big skates to fill. You're not going to fill Bobby Clarke's skates. You kidding me? But he helped me a lot in his general manager's role in pushing me to challenge. I mean, Clarke was the ultimate challenger of guys in that locker room. And he pushed me to challenge my teammates to be better. And, I was caught in that really fine spot between Mike Keenan as a rookie coach, Bob Clarke as a rookie GM, and me, my 2nd year in the league as a rookie captain. I'll picture the chaos of that. The coach knows you're best friends with the GM. You roomed with him last year. And the coach knows that. And the GM knows what he's hired in the coach. It was constant. And I guess from early on, Ray, maybe because I wasn't a draft pick and I wasn't, supposed to be a real good player, I just enjoyed it. And I enjoyed being part of a team and trying to make guys better and being willing to challenge guys. I just saw it as part of it. And it's really underrated how good that locker room was. And there were some real good young leaders in that locker room, guys who ended up, going on, like guys like Rick Tocchet at 19 years old, Ronnie Sutter, Murray Craven. They had a really, really young team. And we all pushed each other. But Brad Marsh was really good. Brad McCrimmon was the best. I mean, he was the behind the scenes, the beast, you know. Mark Howe was quiet, but he was good. Timmy Kerr was silent, but he was good in terms of leadership. So everybody was on board. And so when you challenged someone, it was just because you wanted to win. It wasn't because you thought you were better than them or anything like that.
Now, in the 70s, the Flyers scared the hell out of everybody. By the time you got there, maybe it was a little different, but did you guys realize that when teams came into the Spectrum, we were all scared to death?
Yes. Yes, we did realize it. And we took advantage of it.
Right. I was just going to ask, like, how would you guys, like, you probably never even had to talk about it. You just knew.
No, we knew. We knew. We were really tough, and we knew. Somebody asked me one time if I was tough, Ray, and I said, I don't know. Never really had to find out. Because Lord be anybody touched their captain, then they all went crazy. And, you know, I fought a little bit early, and I had guys come up to me and say, hey, you're not doing that anymore. And I'd say, why not? And they'd say, well, number one, you're not very good at it. And we don't want to hurt our reputation as being tough. But really, that's our job. And if you do that, then you're taking a little piece of our job away, and we don't want you to do that. And we were putting that jersey on. It did make you grow a couple inches taller.
Yeah.
But part of the fear factor was you knew what other guys were coming in. Everybody told you that. And still to this day, I remember having a conversation with Steve Larmer, who I really didn't know, you know, after we were both retired. And he said to me, I still remember pulling in there the first time with Chicago. And he said, you know, I didn't really know anything about, you know, a lot of guys don't watch hockey, and you weren't getting the volume of hockey. And he said, I stood up to get off the bus and no one else was moving. He said, is anybody else getting off the bus here? And he said, I had no idea. And guy said, man, you don't understand. You don't know what it's like to be in here. And it was fun to be like, we were so good at home. One year we were 32-4-4 at home.
Right.
Like, I don't even know how we lost 4 games. You just drove to the rink and you knew you were going to win.
Pooley, if I can interrupt, you know what was one of the most scary parts of that? Seriously, was warm up.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like you guys were creeping down into our end. You weren't, but I felt like the ice was getting smaller. If I lost a puck over the red line, not a chance. Gone. Yeah.
Well, it
didn't matter if that puck had gold in it. I wasn't going to get it.
Didn't help that Dave Brown and Darryl Stanley were stretching on the red line. Right? I mean, you know,
the red line was a death trap.
Yeah, it was fun to be a part of those teams, and you know, as you know well, Ray, most of the tough guys are the best guys in the game. I mean, they just are. They had to be, because that's one of the ways they were accepted. And you know, Dave Brown became a really good friend, and he's been through a lot, and the head pro scout for the Flyers. But he was my first pro right wing. And Ray, you're going to appreciate this. I think you would have played against this guy in junior. Did you play against Mel Hewitt in junior?
No, missed him.
Okay, so Mel was my first pro left winger. So Tommy McVie's the coach, and he puts me on a line with Mel and Dave Brown. And we're going into New Haven. And you don't have Hockey DB to Google, you know, who Mel Hewitt is. I have no idea. But 3 guys on my own team come up to me and say, hey, you got to be really careful of Mel out there. I'm like, I play on his team. And they said, yeah, he's a little out of control. He's knocked out 3 centermen this year because he's so out of control out there. And, and you look at Mel's numbers. I think Mel had 500 and some minutes in the I-1 league one year. Now, think about that. I had Brownie on the right. When I arrived there, Brownie had 39 majors. It was the middle of February.
Golly.
Yeah. Yeah. The confidence that gives you, it's you have full confidence to go out and play your game and worry about nothing else.
You know, you mentioned Brownie, Dave Brown, as being the head pro scout in Philadelphia. I remember one of the first times I saw him doing his thing, and he was typing on a computer, little laptop, and there's Brownie's hands that are the size of my feet.
Huge.
It was incredible to watch him peck away at that thing. And I'm like, how does he even get any of the letters right? But okay, so Pooley, before we get into today's game, then you go to Boston.
Yeah.
And
I had it in my contract that I only played for tough teams, right?
I was going to say, it's not like you went to a bunch of Shrinking Violets there. And there was another rink that everybody was terrified to death of, right? When you went in there. Can you quickly tell that trade story? Because it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So Clark and I had played together and roomed together, and we're really good friends. And we played golf in the summer, a handful of times. And he had told me at one point that he traded somebody, and he said, yeah, but he didn't really care he got traded. I said, how do you know that? He said, well, he asked me who he got traded for. And I said, well, what difference does that mean? And he said, well, I just want to know what his value was. He didn't really care about getting traded. So I remembered that. And we're in Pittsburgh, and I had always roomed with Rick Tocchet. I roomed with Toc for probably 5 or 6 years. 3:00 on game day, phone rings, and no rumors, not one single rumor ever about me being traded. Toc answers it, gets a funny look in his face, says, it's Clark. He hands me the phone. Clark, he says, hey, Davey, hey, listen, I just traded you to Boston. Just like that. I said, really? He said, yeah. Listen, really, really appreciate what you did here, and you're a great captain and stuff. But so I traded you to Boston. You got to call Harry Sinden. I said, no, I really don't have to call Harry Sinden, but thanks, Bob. And I hung up. So Toc looks at me. He goes, what happened? I go, I got traded. He said, for who? I said, I don't know. He said, you didn't ask? I said, it doesn't matter. And so that became the theme of the whole day, every step of the way. And so I called the traveling secretary. I said, hey, you're going to meet me downstairs. I got traded. He goes, really? For who? I said, I don't know. He said, is anybody going with you? I said, I don't know. And now I get on a commercial flight to fly home from Pittsburgh to Philly at 5:00 at night. Everybody knows who I am. Same question, same answer. Land in Philly. And a guy from US Air gets on. He says, Dave, there's a bunch of media here. I can take you out the back of the plane, or we can go, And I said, no, I'll talk to them. So I go out there, cameras and lights and, all the beat writers in Philly, Jay Greenberg and Morganti and all those guys. They said, what do you think of the trade? I don't really know what the trade is. And they said, you don't know who you got traded for? I said, no, not that important. I didn't ask. And so it became quite funny. But, at that point, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, actually. I wasn't positive that I was going to go to Boston. I had a business going in Philly, and I thought I was had just turned 31, I guess. And I thought, well, I'm just going to look at it and see what happens. This is the last year of my deal. And the All-Star break was coming up. So I actually packed the family up and went up to the Pocono Mountains and just relaxed for a few days and got things sorted out. And then ended up going and joined a pretty good team there in Boston, as you know too well, Ray.
Yeah, I do. You bumped us out. What a great story, though, because when I got traded, I wanted to know. And
everybody does. I would have too.
Except he told you.
To make Clarky happy.
that's even better. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to bring you to today. The Oilers get bumped out in 4. We're all, I think, pretty stunned that it happened so quickly, whether you thought the Oilers were the better team or not, whatever. Ken Holland talks in his presser about some of their needs or wants. And it got me to thinking that, their bottom 6 was really ineffective for them. They get beat by a team that in Winnipeg that has Nate Thompson and Trevor Lewis on their 4th line, who are never going to score, ever, ever, ever. It doesn't matter. Not for the way the Jets are built. They're there for leadership. They're there for reliability. They're there for penalty killing. But what it got me wondering was, would it be possible for the Oilers to bring in an older leadership type player? And could they be a leader with somebody as dominant as McDavid and Draisaitl in that locker room?
I think the answer is yes. And I think it has to be part of the equation in Edmonton. And, you talk about captaincy, Ray. I don't think the best player has to be the captain. And I think I was living proof. I wasn't the best player. I was never the best player. And I was willing to embrace it. And I think there are guys like that. And you've got to be a good player and you've got to be a contributor. I don't think a fourth liner can be an effective captain, because you've got to be a contributing player in a significant way. But you don't have to be the best player. In fact, when those young guys, the young best players, were all getting named captain, I said, I wouldn't put that responsibility on. I'd keep them free and clear of that, because what I took a lot of pride in was having the pulse of the locker room and being able to be the liaison between the team and the coach. But I'd go and sit down with Mike Keenan or, whomever it was, Paul Holmgren, and lay it on the line and tell him I didn't want to give the best player in that team that responsibility. I didn't want him to have to worry about that.
So with the veteran you bring in, if you're management, do you want him to know McDavid beforehand, or does that not matter?
It doesn't matter, and it would be someone I'd be trading for. I don't think this player is on the market as a free agent, or I don't think it's that type of player. I think this is, you're going to go out and you're going to seek out a guy that you think can do that.
So you're target shopping that player.
I'm target shopping, and that's why, I was intrigued when a few Oiler players, but Connor said in particular, we've got a really good core here. How many players would he consider in that core?
Yeah.
Well, I'm guessing it's Nurse, it's McDavid, it's Draisaitl,
right?
It's probably Nugent Hopkins,
right?
Larson.
Okay. So 2 of those are UFAs.
Right. And maybe Clefbaum.
Okay. And Clefbaum, I would consider that. He's hurt. If you're going to change this team, you have to change this team. And so 2 of those UFAs, that's why $10+ million of your 23.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can bring those guys back. Like, I don't, because you could say, okay, well, Nugent Hopkins didn't have a great year this year. Well, he did have a great year last year, and they got beat in the play-ins. Like, something's got to change in that locker room. Yeah. It has to. And so, and by all accounts, I don't know Ryan Nugent Hopkins. He sounds like a great guy, a great team.
He's a fabulous kid. He really
all
is.
That.
Yeah.
Except maybe he just doesn't fit there with those guys. If you want to win, maybe you need a different type of player who's a bit more sandpaper with those guys. Mm-hmm. You don't need a guy who's a best friend to them or a good buddy, because how many times do you hear in these exit meetings? Exit meetings crack me up at the end of the year, because it's like, this is the tightest team I've ever played on. Really? You certainly didn't look like you played for each other. Oh, no, we're a great bunch of guys, best group of guys ever, closest group of guys I've ever had in the locker room. Really? Like, that makes me laugh, because you weren't, because you didn't play like that on the ice. Right. And maybe it's because you don't have enough talent. That's a different story. But I mean, obviously, I think a tremendous amount of respect for Kenny Holland. He has an opportunity to change the script there in a big way, not in a little bit around the edges way. And I think the temptation, when you have 2 of the best players, you're allowed to be close enough just because of those 2 guys. But are you really close?
Yeah. You miss that management, Dave? I mean, you mentioned earlier in the podcast, I mean, you've been in the broadcast world now for 6 years. Do you miss, being around the rink, being around the boardroom, scouting players, talking trades, talking contracts, all of that?
I don't, because I get to do it with you. And I get to sleep at night,
Yeah, fair.
Right.
From a lifestyle standpoint, it is all consuming. It is 24/7, 365. It doesn't matter if you're driving down the road on a sunny day with your windows open and the music going. In the back of your mind, you're worried about signing someone, a free, something. It's so constant. And, I've competed my whole life as a player, as a college coach, as a manager. And I get to be in the game now. And people say, don't you miss the competition and the man, I had a lot of that in my life. I had a lot of sleepless nights where I worried about every single player in the team. every single deal. And, you know, when I was a captain, I worried about other players and been through a whole bunch in the game. And the game's been great to me. But in a way now, I get to be a part of it without it being absolutely all-consuming every single minute of my life. And I'm comfortable with that.
That's terrific stuff, Dave. The only problem is, you know, you're like Billy Clement. You're so good in telling stories and sharing your experiences that we're going to have you back on the Ray and Dregs podcast. This was a bit of a trial run for you.
And I passed.
No,
well, the only thing you didn't bring, Pooley, I will say, is Billy talked about his neighbor delivering a moonshine. and unless you've got something like that, you're going to have to catch up a little bit.
Okay, well, I'll really put my mind to. I'm thinking of some next door neighbors that I have, Ray, and I could probably name drop a little bit here. So,
there we go. We're in.
I can think of one, not a next door neighbor, but how about your partner in crime on the set there, O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill? You could probably share a few of those stories.
Yeah, those we'll have to save for another time. But I was with our producer Peter Buchanan in Pittsburgh Airport. I think last year and a half ago, maybe. We were on our way to do a game in Columbus, and a guy's coming down the elevator, and he says, Coach Poulin. Bucky snaps his head around. He goes, is that Lou Holtz? I said, yeah, he was my next door neighbor at Notre Dame. That's my next door neighbor.
That's
right?
awesome.
That's a good one right there.
Nice talk with Coach Holtz. You know, and it was funny. He lived in a small town, right? And we built this house, and it's on a little lake. It's on a cul-de-sac. Just an absolutely gorgeous setup. You know, and after you've played all these years, you finally settled in and not really thinking of who lived next door. The first football weekend, 6:30 a.m., there's a steady stream of cars down the street to see Coach Holtz's house. 6:30 a.m. There's 10 homes on the street. I remember going outside, I had a little black lab, and I'm going outside to get the paper, and I walked in and said, we just made a huge mistake.
It's not as quiet as I thought.
Exactly.
That's awesome, Pooley. Thanks for doing this. Again, we know how incredibly busy you are.
All good, guys. Enjoyed it. Looking forward to part 2, part 3, part 4, wherever we take this.
Awesome.
Have a great day.
That.
Awesome. I'm glad golf's opened up for you, Pooley. Go get another ace this year.
We will. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Yeah.